Hi, welcome back to CS170. We're starting off this week for November 2nd. We're going to be covering some more spreadsheet stuff, but before I do, I want to just cover a few things that people have been asking about. One of them is related to what the upcoming exam will be covering. So if you look at our schedule here, we're over here, November 2nd this week here. Right, and what that means is we're going to have your exam coming up next week, and all of this stuff here in this light blue color is what you're going to be covering. And with that, you might remember at the beginning of this section we were covering flowcharts and pseudocode, and then really everything else was around JavaScripts. So let me just kind of write down a couple of things just for your reference, things you probably want to study, take note of, and whatnot. And if you have any questions on those, obviously we have lab hours. So let me come back to here. Okay, so we have our lab hours here. Okay, so for these lab hours, you can go to any of these. It doesn't matter who your TA is, you can go to any of them, and I would probably suggest to try a couple of different ones to see, which one works for your schedule and works for, just understanding things or explaining things the way you would like. You also have office hours here. Just remember for my office hours, even though I'm listing it here, you really should just send me an email so I can reserve time. And it doesn't have to be within this time slot on Friday. It could be some other time. So just send me your email to reserve time. Okay. So just remember, lab hours, you can go to any of these. You don't have to go to any one in particular. So you have all these times, which seems to have a pretty decent coverage in terms of hours and days. So take a look at that. Let me come back to here. All right, so like I said, you have the flowcharts and pseudocode, and that's within your modules resources. You'll see that. And then within this next upcoming exam, you'll have all these different JavaScript topics here. So we cover some debugging. We cover what does event-driven program mean. I mean, you did it a lot for your homework, right? So it's really all those on-click type of stuff. That's an event, right? And based off of that, you'll execute some code, right? You remember functions, arrays, and loops, okay? And let me just type this out as we go here, just so I can get some things going in my mind, and you can have something to refer to as things you should be looking at. So remember, we have the pseudocode, and you have flowcharts. Okay, if there's any questions on those, make sure you refer back, ask your TAs or myself how you want to, if you have any questions on how you want to represent flowcharts and pseudocode. There is a certain flow to it you should kind of remember in terms of like the ins and outs, the shapes that you need, and stuff like that. And it's in the reference sheet, so you should be able to look that up. I remember I cut a video that kind of talked a bit about some of the challenges maybe some people had in figuring out how to do the conditional logic. So just remember conditional logic. What does that mean for pseudocode and flowcharts, right? So, essentially if, right? And then within that you have if, else, right? And what does that mean? There is a distinction between like doing like 3 if clauses like this versus like doing if else if something in here. Okay, so there is a difference, so make sure you try to understand what that really means, and that does have a difference in terms of the number of comparisons you may or may not do, but for this class that's probably not the biggest concern, but you do want to make sure the logic flows through correctly. Now the other thing you want to remember is like, and you saw for a lot of your quizzes, right, you'll have like a variable, right, A, B, and C, and you'll trace that through your program, right? So there'll be like variable A, B here, and then you'll do like a function here, and then maybe they'll declare a variable within there, and they'll say what are the values on that, right? So remember, when you're doing JavaScript, so you can declare some variables, and you can be initializing it, A equals 0, let's say, and then you'll have another function, let's say, function ABC, and then within that, you'll have like another variable, and A equals 5, let's say, and then you'll say, okay, well, what is A here? Okay, but then once you're done with the function, what is A now? Okay, and so as you know, or you probably know, within the function, it'll be whatever this value is. So in this case, it's 5. But once you come back out of this function, it's going to be back to 0 again, right? Because this is the variable A that they're talking about. Generally, I don't really like to reuse the variable names at these different levels because it could get confusing if you're trying to eyeball it and debug it. It's a little bit of a pain, but it works. So you should just understand, and this is what people refer to as variable scoping, right? So within this range, what is the variable? Within this range, what is the variable? The other thing you want to remember is numbers versus strings. Now in this class, although we talked about the variable types being a Boolean, we haven't really done too much with it. Maybe Wednesdays I should just like make a note on that. Boolean is basically true or false, right? So you could declare a variable to be Boolean and say if that variable is true, then do something. Okay, so that's all that means, right? But remember, numbers versus strings. That means if I declare something or I do something. So let's say I say variable equals, and I put quotes around a 0, then I try to do some math on it. Let's say ABC plus 5. You're gonna get an error, right? Because you set the variable, even though it looks like a 0, that's actually a string because you put the quotes around it, right? And so a string plus a number is not going to give you a good result. Okay, so pay attention to that. So you remember number, right? That function there to make something a number. You remember you did the prompt times 1, right? That was to get something and basically pull it in as a number. You remember when you have numbers, you have the to fix, something like that. You remember how to do concatenation. Concatenation, right? So if something is set up as a string and you do a plus on it, right, you're basically going to concatenate those two things together, right? So it could be like alert ABC plus DEF, something like that, right? But the other thing is when you set up as a string, it looks like a number, you're going to end up with concatenation. So that's why when you had something like this, and it was a 5 plus and an 8, it's not 13, right? It's gonna be 5 and 8. It will be 58, and it'll be a string 58. Okay. So things like that you want to make sure you pay attention to. Obviously, doing functions, arrays. What else was there back here? Yeah, you remember like for your assignments, you had your button, um, radio, text. You remember to access the values, you would have whatever, let's say, and then it would be like a dot value to get to it, right? So you have to remember that. So that's HTML, right? But within that, these things you have like the event, which is on click. I mean, there's other events too, but what we've been teaching with is on click, that you'll be calling or doing JavaScript, okay? So very quickly, I just went through all of those different things. Those are the different types of topics. Oh yeah, and don't forget you have loops also, okay? I think that would cover all the stuff. So with this, you have like a lot of stuff that pretty much you just create examples, right? And just have it all handy and, understand it, follow it through, do the code tracing with the variables like I mentioned up here. And that really is the gist of what the exam will cover, right? It's not the same as like on exam 1 and a little bit of exam 3, or the final exam, I should say. Where you have a little bit of like almost like remembering certain things and whatnot, right? So you had the search engine thing here, a little bit of computer history and whatnot. So it's a little bit more challenging to study for versus this. All you have to do is pull together all the different examples, or what I call use cases, and it should be straightforward to study for this exam, for the JavaScript exam. It gets a little bit trickier for the final. Like I said, it's similar to the first one where you have like some history and whatnot. You'll have like some social implications of IT, privacy, security, that type of stuff. So hopefully what I just told you gave you some insight on what you should be looking at to study for. Like I said, the best advice I can give you is really having snippets of code and what the output looks like. Do some alerts, trace those variables through those code snippets and understand what's happening with those variables. Understand variable types, right? What's a valid variable? Okay, for JavaScript, I should say, JavaScript. Okay, so very quickly, we're going to get like a regular study guide and whatnot that you can look at. But very quickly, these are all the different things you want to try to pay attention to, okay, as you study. For this quick video, I'm just going to do the one bit about the wildcard here. Right? It's only on the first page here. So you have like this wildcard stuff. There's like VLOOKUP, which is actually pretty important for Excel usage. I'm going to save that for the following video. So just to keep this a quick video, I'm going to call this video to be like a little bit of a quick tips and pointer or prep for the second exam, and then just wildcard. So wildcard is basically this little star here, right? And you might remember it if you're doing stuff on like file systems, like with looking at files and whatnot. Search for a whole bunch of files that include this wildcard here. Okay, and you can see it down here where they have the wildcard usage. You say count if, and it says vine, and then there's like a star here. Okay, so I'm gonna just very quickly do something like that. So let's say, I don't even have to do any case. So what do they have? They have vine roses, and I spelled wine here, vine what else do they have? Vine plans. What else do we got here? I don't know, I'll just say rows. And bonsai. Okay. And so let's do a count if. Equals count if. And here's my range. And what's my criteria? So this is where I'm going to say, well, let's just do rows for a second. So we'll do rows. And close it off. Okay, so there's one, which is what we expect. Now let's see, count if and let's do the wildcard. So let's do Vine, and we'll do the star, and don't forget the quote, and close, and we get 3, right? 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so that's really what you'll be using the wildcard for. Okay, and let me do another thing here very quickly. I kind of talked about this in previous videos, but I need to emphasize it again because we're going to be referring to it in some assignments and whatnot, is how to do basically an append, or you can call it concatenate, I guess, but I look at it as append. So if I do count if, count if, and I do the range here, that's fine. Now my criteria is, I'm going to say, let me do this and just start off with that for now. So it's 1, right? Because we have this, it only found that. But now let me go back to here, and I'm going to do the ampersand sign, which is that, and then I'm going to do a quote, and then I'm going to do the wildcard thing, and that. Okay, so ampersand is basically taking the value of this vine and concatenating or appending this wildcard. That gives us 3. Okay, so this I hard coded it, right? So it's vine this. This I'm setting it to look at a cell and then doing an ampersand sign, appending it to the wildcard. So that what that means is, let me just change this for a second. Okay. H18. Let me change it to, then I won't get any matches. There you go. Okay. So by changing this, I kind of make this flexible, right? So I don't have to go in here and change the formula if I want to change my search. Let me change this to rows. Okay. Bonsai. And vine. Okay. And it became 3. All right. So that's what you get by doing something like this. So I have the cell reference, and then I append the wildcard to it, right? Or I could have just done it with the cell reference to make this search. So this is an important thing. Pay attention to this because it's going to come up in your other work with Excel. Okay? All right. I'm going to stop this for now. I'm going to come back with another video for VLOOKUP shortly. Okay? Thank you.